Hello, everyone. Welcome to Anime Initiative, the anime focus segment and part of Comic Book Nation, your geeky family podcast run by Comicbook.com. I'm your host, Megan Peters, and I am here with my friends and coworkers, Nick Valdez and Evan Valentine. How y'all doing?
Howdy, everybody.
Good. What a week. What a week.
Honestly, every time we end a show, I'm like, man, I really hope we have content to talk about in the next episode. And it never fails. When I'm putting together the rundown and schedule of this, I'm like panicking because there's too much news to talk about. So welcome to Anime Initiative, the show where we have too much to talk about. Basically, we talk about all things anime, manga, otaku, interest, animation, you name it, we'll talk about it. We have a pretty busy show today. We're talking about a ton of spring anime updates, as well as some manga updates, including some cancellations, which I'm very sad to talk about. And then in the second half of the show, we are going to be, diving deep, getting into the bigger picture. We're going to be talking about the future of anime streaming, specifically in light of the death of the OG, the original Funimation. May it rest in peace. The service has officially closed. Its app and its website as part of its full merger with Crunchyroll. So we're going to be getting into all of those nitty-gritty discussions. Before the show even started, me talking with my host here, we had some really spicy opinions, so you're not going to want to miss that. I'll say that much. But first, let's hit all the news beats, because I know we're going to have to be sad. Let's start on a little bit of a downer so we can build up, We did get some unfortunate news from Shueisha, the publisher of Shonen Jump and that lovely franchise of magazines from Japan, that we have gotten a cancellation. It has gone live. Mama Yu Yu is dead. Nick, can you walk us through Mama Yu Yu? Because I knew you were number one Mama Yu Yu stan.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's around like chapter 15, it started speeding up, and usually when that happens. So just a quick little thing. Mama Yu Yu came out with Shonen Jump in September, and as many of the buddies who might also be reading Shonen Jump every week will note, it's around chapter 15 that we start getting a yes or no in terms of a continuation. But with Mama Yu Yu, around that point, it started to pivot in a weird way, in that, like, we started to get introduced to a ton of new characters at the same time. And at first I thought, oh, okay, because it's like a sort of everyone's kind of fighting in a battle royale kind of thing. But it became very clear very soon that this was leading towards a climax. And in my head, even up until the penultimate chapter of the series before the cancellation was announced, I was like, well, there's still a chance that this could just be leading towards a phase 2 of whatever this series is planned. But no, by chapter 28, you have the main character straight up saying, revealing things like that would have been huge reveals at the end of the series. Like, he finds out he's been like a dead clone the whole time, tied to the main villain, without getting into the nitty-gritty of like
reveal.
Yeah, without getting to the nitty-gritty of like the power system in a series that will no longer matter. It's just, because he's tied into the villain, once the main villain dies, he will also die likely. But, it also had one of the Deku and Shigaraki things where the villain's not really a villain. And, we get some of that backstory. And so in the final chapter, it just does one of the things that many of these canceled series do, where it's like it ends on a page going, the fight continues, the end. And, it's just disappointing all around. And it's a shame, because when you look at Mama Yu Yu, you look at it, it's like a fantasy story. It's a story that hasn't really been seen in Shonen Jump. It had good character design, good art. Mostly, like, when you get to the villains and the monsters, the demon lords themselves, like, they're really well designed and had cool looking stuff. It's just, it didn't last. It didn't hit. And I don't know if it's because everyone had like a super complicated name, or just something just didn't click with the audience in Japan, where it is, that's where it needs to hit. And unfortunately, this is it. So after, let's see, it came out in September. My math is failing me right now, but after 7-8 months, it's over at 29 chapters.
Didn't even a full year. So, I mean, it's so interesting, especially the problem that I've seen in talking about the cancellation of Mama Yu Yu, and as a bigger problem, a lot of shonen manga and shonen jump titles, because the competition for manga to succeed is so intense. One of the things that I continue to see is like people pitting Mama Yu Yu against another major new series from Shonen Jump, which is of course Kagurabachi. That
Hmm.
series is just running in terms of sales and promotions, and ranking both in Japan and globally in terms of manga prints. Um, and people were just comparing it like, "Oh, well, you can only support one." It's like, "Nah, you can support more than one. You can
Yeah.
support as many manga as you want." Um, and the thing online is most people that I've at least seen reactions for Mama Yu Yu are certainly disappointed that it just didn't get enough breathing room. Because if you look at, even going back to like things like Dragon Ball, or Naruto, those series really didn't get good for like 30 chapters. Like, it wasn't until they really reached, like, tournament arcs and stuff like that, that they really got a huge following. Um, and it just seems like these days they don't get that runway to do well, which is unfortunate.
I think that
Yeah.
one of the things that Shonen Jump really needs to, because I was stunned by this news personally. I thought Mama Yu Yu was going to be one of the next big things for Shonen Jump, and Shueisha is in a place where they are staring down the barrel, and us as manga fans are staring down the barrel of some of their really big heavy hitters have either already ended or are ending. Demon
Mhm.
Slayer is done. Jujutsu Kaisen's final arc is either in the process or it's about to happen. My Hero Academia is about to end. One Piece is about to end. We don't know if Dragon Ball is going to keep going. So it's just kind of like you both had kind of said, we need to get, or they rather need to get to a place where they're able to let these stories breathe and you're able to give them time. Because I was kind of shocked at the idea that like it's being canceled from a place where it just wasn't able to strike a chord. Like, not every series is going to be Kagurabachi or Bacha. Not every series is going to be that. So it's just like you have to kind of let stuff breathe and
Mhm.
kind of move from there.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's
I don't
it's gonna
know.
be interesting to see. I think they're definitely in a weird place with manga that, they have all of these global, outlets for having online manga libraries. You have services like
Mhm.
Manga Plus and the Shonen Jump app specifically, for Shueisha, globally. And in reports, anime and manga professionals alike, openly admit that with the aging population in Japan, how small the population set is, they're looking onto the global scale to really kind of expand and continue to make manga and anime and exciting and boundary pushing mediums essentially. So they're needing to look globally and get these opinions, because while the table of contents for Shonen Jump often had Mama Yu Yu listed as one of the, least trending titles compared to Kagurabachi. There was some decent hype for the series globally that
Mhm.
fans wanted to see play out. Um, so I think something's gonna have to change. I think
Mhm.
with Shueisha's kind of push forward. They have plenty of good series that are going live right now, but it's looking at the replacement value of what's on track to end in the next few years versus, what they have going. It's heartbreaking. Mama Yu Yu, justice for Mama Yu Yu is what I'm saying. That's the hashtag I'm proposing. But it has to be said, they announced that Mama Yu Yu is done. Final chapter is out, but we are getting 3 new series to the Shonen Jump family. One which a lot of people were surprised about. There are 3 titles: Nagai no Astro, which will be going live first, in the following magazine, Kyokuto Necromance will be going live, and then we will have Cycle Biori. Um, the first title that I mentioned, Nagai no Astro, is the one that's gaining all the attention because it is by the creator of Tokyo Revengers. How are we feeling
Mm.
about that?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
That wasn't a great sound.
yeah, I'm kind of good on,
You're good on
speaking of a
that?
series, yeah, like Tokyo Revengers wasn't it for me. It started out super hot, and as anybody who
Mhm.
watched the anime might kind of also agree with, thanks to and also unfortunately poor adaptation. It's the manga really, it's really good up until the second half, and then the second half just kept going and going and going, and then we get the
It
ending,
never
and it's
ended.
like, yeah, we get to the ending, which is sort of like, okay, fine. Like I was fine with it. It was good in the circumstances, but I was so hyped, and mostly I'm just disappointed by it. And I'm so disappointed that it kind of soured me on
Mhm.
Ken Wakui in general, this creator, that like I'm looking at this new series, I'm looking at characters that closely resemble some for Tokyo Revengers. I hate to
Mhm.
say it. I know creator art, it varies, and it's
They got they have a visual identity, that's what I like to say.
yes,
Mm.
yes, but it's really giving me like Hiro Mashima fairy tale vibes, where some characters will look like directly like other characters, and I'm looking at it, and I of course I'm gonna read the first chapter. This is my job, this is what we do, and I'm hoping for better, but knowing where Tokyo Revengers ended up, I'm looking at this one going, oh no, I don't know if I can do that again.
See, here's what I'll say. One, I will say of anybody I've ever talked to that really liked Tokyo Revengers, Nick is maybe the most positive about how the series ended. That the and we're not going to talk about it. If you're reading Tokyo Revengers, breathe a sigh of relief. We're not going to spoil anything here about how
Right.
it ends. But those last like 10 chapters, they just, I've never seen a fandom lose its mind like the Tokyo Revengers in terms of backlash to a finale. But I will say the first half of Tokyo Revengers for me really slapped. I will admit I'm not a huge fan of the anime piecing, but when I look at Ken Wakui's manga, I think it's a pretty solid take. I'm curious to see because up until now, the creator of Tokyo Revengers has worked pretty much only with Kodansha, which is where Tokyo Revengers was published. Now he's going to Shueisha, which is obviously a new publisher, a new editorial department, new editors, new, story demands or story expectations. I I'm pretty hopeful that maybe, the editorial shift will be able to give maybe more structure to Ken Wakui as he's creating Nagai no Astro. I will say, of course, the characters that we've seen from this new series do look very reminiscent to what we've seen in Tokyo Revengers. We don't know much about the story of what this is gonna look like currently, but it does seem like it's gonna kinda have that same delinquent Yankee vibe that we see from Tokyo Revengers. So I'll be curious. I mean, it starts this coming week. So we're gonna have an answer soon or not. I mean, a lot of the times these first chapters make or break it.
Mm.
But I think everybody was surprised knowing that Kodansha lost one of its, top creators that it's had for years in its pocket to Shueisha. So you don't see that often, I will say, in the
I,
manga industry. So
I think that like any manga takes a village, right?
mhm.
And I think that like with Ken, we don't necessarily know all the behind the scenes stuff when it came to because I'm on the same page as both of you. I thought Tokyo Revengers had a very strong premise and it started good, and then the whole series went to pot when they hit a certain point in the story that I wasn't a big fan of. So I think B. Lee in the comments asked a good question. Maybe he learned his lesson. I don't know. One thing that Ken could do is kind of like Attack on Titan's Hajime Isayama and just publicly say, I'm very sorry for the ending of Tokyo Revengers, and I'll try to do better in the future. So, but honestly, like, I'll give it a shot. I'm always willing to I'm very forgiving in that respect. I'm willing to see kind of where he takes this new series. I don't mind as much that like I think like when it comes to the artistic styles of manga creators and everything, like if it kind of looks similar to Tokyo Revengers, I'm willing to let it slide a little bit more, I think, but like I'll give it a shot and I'll see. But I'll also take kind of a cautious optimism in it where if it starts to kind of go off the rails, then I will be out 100%.
Yeah,
Well,
and
we'll just have to see, I guess.
Hmm.
yeah, as we just talked about, Shueisha is very competitive. I mean, Masashi Kishimoto, Naruto's creator, couldn't even get a second series off the ground with Shonen Jump
Oh,
as it is
dude,
now.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
like,
Rip
if
Samurai.
yeah, it's like, yeah, like it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, like, if Samurai 8 couldn't do it, then, maybe this one, it'll get leeway, but at a certain point, it'll be like, it's not working. And then they will cut it off. So that is the blessing in disguise here. If it's not working, they'll just end it.
All right. Well, we'll see how it goes. We'll check back in a couple episodes, see how we're feeling about Nagai no Astro. But we got to take a little bit of a segue twist to talk about one of my favorite anime, which I don't care. I don't care if it's overhyped. It's my favorite. My Hero Academia, Your Next, has a brand new trailer out. I'm high key and low key obsessed. Basically, if you're not familiar, My Hero Academia is super busy right now. The manga is working through its final act. We get season 7 going live this season, in the spring season after some recap episodes. But we're also getting a My Hero Academia movie later in the year. And essentially, with this new trailer, we get a really good look at the villains that we're going to be facing this time. And I'm trying to think, how do I say this politely? But essentially, the villains that's leading this movie is just like ugly All Might wannabe. I guess that's not. I
No,
mean, he's a
that's
villain. I don't care if I hurt
I
his
think
feelings.
that's yeah, it's totally the point. I like they
Yeah.
he's even called like Darkbite, right?
Yeah,
So
he
yeah.
literally is called
Yeah.
Dark Might. We have All
Yeah.
Might and we have Dark Might. So yeah, we're gonna have a little bit of a weird kind of it's not even imposter, because it's not like the point is he's trying to be All Might. The point is he's trying to just emulate All Might, but as a villain,
Mhm.
which I love. I love that idea. I mean, it's such a classic, cheesy, Western superhero comic trope that
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I'm
As
so
as a as a
excited.
as a big comic book fan myself, like I'm always a sucker for dark reflection of heroes. It's like, yeah, sometimes it
Always.
gets a little overdone. I think the MCU has done it a lot with like creating, oh, it's like the hero but a little darker. But
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for like characters like Superman's Bizarro, Spider-Man's Venom, the Flash's Reverse Flash. And the idea of the like on a number of different levels, the idea of like taking the symbol of peace and creating a dark reflection of that. I mean, yeah, that's kind of what All for One is, but on the flip side, creating an evil All Might who has those powers. And I'd like to ask the rest of the panel, like, is All Might even that strong anymore in terms of like his power set? Because Deku has gone so much further with One for All and like the numerous quirks that he's been able to master at this point. It's like, is he a threat physically anymore? That's an interesting question that I had when I was watching the trailer.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to me to see how they deal with that, because obviously for those caught up with My Hero Academia's anime specifically, we won't go into manga spoilers.
Yeah.
But we'll say it's well known. All Might is no longer in the picture as a pro hero, but he's alive and helping, with the effort to take down Shigaraki and the League and All for One. But it's Deku now. Deku has effectively taken over as that kind of symbol and is trying to build up to that point. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see All Might's successor take on this dark reflection of his mentor, because All Might himself, as far as we're aware, and as far as the trailers and everything have shown, is not going to be in this fight directly. Which previous My Hero Academia movies have involved All Might directly, as a fighting, person who's in the battle. So I'm curious to see. I mean, again, just like Evan said, I'm always a sucker for the dark reflection of a hero.
Mhm.
Um, and I know, some of the first complaints I saw was, oh, well, isn't that just, All for One or whatever? Or like how Shigaraki is kind of the dark reflection of Izuku. Uh, All for One is just like on another level of evil.
Yeah.
He's just a spawn of Satan. So I think that this is an interesting thing. We know that series creator Kohei Horikoshi oversaw the story for this. So again, this movie will be considered canon, as it slots somewhere between seasons 6 and 7. So it'll be coming out later this year. And I think my favorite thing about this is the voice actor for All Might in Japan, Kenta Miyake, is going to be voicing Dark Might. So we're
Mm.
gonna get to
Oh.
see a different take on that voice acting. So hopefully in the English dub, that means Chris Sabat, who plays All Might in the English dub, will get to do Dark Might as well.
Cool.
Because he does a good villain. So, do you have any thoughts on that, Nick?
No,
I
just
know My Hero Academia isn't your favorite.
yeah, no, I concur. The movies are fun. I do have to admit, I still haven't seen the third one, so I'm behind on My Hero Academia movies because they're fun things, but they're not
Right.
like high
You're not
prio in
super
terms of like
invested in the show. Why
yeah.
bother?
I mean, look, we know where I'm sitting with that, so I'm yeah.
Hey, I got something that I know you're invested in.
Oh my god, yeah.
That's an ominous statement from me. I understand a good bit of Gundam lore, but I've got the biggest blank when it comes to G Gundam. I have such little context. You want to talk to me about, Mobile Suit Gundam Wing? I'm your girl. You want to talk to me about G Gundam?
Yeah.
I'm going to look a little confused. But I do understand that we got some interesting teasers for the series this past week. So, Nick, please tell me what I need to know.
Oh man, this hand of mine glows with an awesome power. Its burning grip tells me to defeat you. So,
so good. So good.
Is that a quote from the series?
Oh, absolutely. It's Domonkashu's when he uses shiny thing. I'll set the table.
Okay, I'll be quiet. I'm listening.
Mobile Fighter G Gundam. It's officially celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. It first premiered in 1994, and 30 years, and I feel myself aging just intensely as a result. But no, so it's part of Gundam's overall 45th anniversary celebration, and it's highlighting. So Mobile Fighter G Gundam, not only did it announce and reveal a special logo for this 30th anniversary, it also dropped a mystery tease of something new. There was a sketch of a brand new character, not named. The voice actor for Domon in Japan, Tomokazu Seki, I believe that's his name. He didn't even know about the project itself. It was a surprise to him at the panel of whatever they announced it at. So we have no idea what's coming, but it's a new G Gundam thing. I hope it's like a movie or just something cool because G Gundam, I know Evan's the Gundam guy. I know this, but G Gundam is my baby. So
I love
G
that.
Gundam,
Make that a shirt.
yeah, G Gundam is if you took Gundam, they literally took Gundam out of the Universal Century storyline, which by that point I think was at the Victory Gundam era, which I totally don't remember, but it wasn't working. So they're okay, let's do something new. And so they added a bit of shonen flair to it. They added a bit of Super Robo Gao Gaigar type of deals with it and came out with G Gundam, which is basically just all the countries of the world, instead of having wars, instead fight in a tournament, the Gundam Fight Tournament. And so Article 1 of the Gundam Fight Tournament Charter is if a head unit is destroyed, then they are eliminated from the tournament. So Domonkashu, the whole thing is he's representing in the Shining Gundam for Japan, but all the while he's searching for his missing brother. And it's basically every episode he uses his main move, which is Shining Finger, and then you get this awesome soundtrack. As a kid, you see that once, maybe in binge it doesn't really work, but once a week you see the Shining Finger, you get your dose of that every week, and then it evolves to stronger attacks, so that by the end of it he's literally shooting out a logo of his King of Hearts logo that he wears on his hand. He's shooting out a real king out of his hand.
Oh my god.
It gets to such non-mecha anime levels, but still Gundam, and it's still I know Gundam Wing was the big one for many, but G Gundam was that was my baby. And the fact that it's 30 years since then and we're getting something new, whatever it might be, I could not be more excited.
I have to share in Nick's excitement for this news because I actually didn't see this until I saw the notes for our show earlier this morning.
Really?
And was oh my god, G
Yeah.
Gundam is coming back. Like G Gundam for me, like would I consider G Gundam my favorite Gundam series of all time? No, it's tough to beat Wing. It's a high bar to clear. Would I consider it in my top 3? Oh hell yeah. I think that
Yeah.
G Gundam is the most fun Gundam series. It is the most anime series. And as Nick had said, there is no better there was no better line delivery than my right hand of mine is shining with a glowing
With an
power.
awesome-
My
with an awesome
burning hand
power.
is telling me to defeat you.
Yeah.
Take this, my anger, my rage, and
My
all
love-
of my sorrow.
Yeah, my love, my
Shining,
anger, and all of a sudden, yeah,
shining finger sword, like so good, so good.
Honestly, my favorite thing about this podcast so far is, despite having worked with you guys for like literally years, I'm discovering all of these like I've seen so many Gundam series, Iron Blooded Orphans, so many times I've watched that. Grew up on Wing, but like I have. This I'm all right. Well, I guess I know what I'm doing today.
Megan. The main gimmick at first is like literally why his hand glows is so that they can put the Gundam hand on a Gundam head and crush it. Like that's literally like the main gimmick at first. So that's how he wins his matches, by destroying the enemy unit's head. And
Why
it's
is
such
it
like a
already the best Gundam.
and then like in the video
There's an
footage we're
argument to be
showing
made.
now. Yeah, in the video footage we're showing now, like it's we see some of the other countries represented. You get like a Mummy Gundam, the Tequila Gundam, which is like the one from Mexico. It's all like it's super stereotypical. The France, their Gundam comes out of a giant snail shell. Like it's really like it's very stereotypical. All this stuff it throws all that out there, but it's so heightened to such a degree that it's so like. You get lost in it, and it's so fun, and it's so clear that this is just super robot vibes and like super Saiyan energies, and like by the end of it, you'll be so hyped. There's like 50 something episodes. You can find the subbed version on Crunchyroll. Unfortunately, the dub version is only available on like home media. And it's the dub version is what I grew up with, so I prefer it. But
well, I'm immediately gonna be watching this because you led me great with Konosuba. So wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully whatever this mysterious teaser is for G Gundam turns out to be more, because I am already obsessed and I've not seen a single episode. So that is intense. All right. Well, we'll have to see how that comes out. We'll give y'all an update. As this comes forward, because I'm sure Nick and Evan will be, crying over it. Hopefully I will be too, because I'll have finished watching G Gundam at that point. But to kind of end our conversation for our news roundup, before we move to our larger conversation, we have to, as anime fans, discuss what happened on One Piece this week.
Right.
One Piece episode 1100 went live, and the Toei animation staff ate, left no crumbs, licked the plate. I cannot. I almost have no words. I cannot stress. I might actually tear up. Guys, this is bad. I cannot stress how vindicating it feels for me as a One Piece fan since I was a little kid to see the amount that the show has grown. One Piece episode 1100, it has some of the best animation I have seen
So good.
in the past year. I mean, even looking at some of the stuff that Jujutsu Kaisen season 2 did during its, Sukuna versus Maharanga, anything like that. I mean, clearly impressive. But man, One Piece consistently as a weekly show, we have to, and it's all year. It's not a seasonal show. The Toei animation team is just sick. There's no other way to describe it. Seeing Luffy in Gear 5, 1, always amazing. 2, Luffy's fighting Lucy. Is it Lucy or Lucy? I never pronounce it right.
I always say Lucci. Like
Yeah,
I don't know. I just
too?
yeah.
But sometimes I always doubt myself. Seeing Luffy fight Lucy again after so long. I mean, the first Luffy versus Lucci fight from years ago, I remember,
Iconic.
blew my mind.
Yeah,
And now
iconic.
seeing this, gagged. I'm disgusted. So, what do y'all think?
I think that one of the things that I know that like there's always the comparison between animation and the manga and the original manga, and there's a back and forth between which kind of works better in terms of, especially with One Piece. I feel there's like this back and forth in terms of what works best for the story of Luffy and the Straw Hat Pirates, but for Gear Fifth specifically, I think that the animation just works so well because everything kind of like Luffy becomes a living cartoon. And so seeing that in motion, as well as, man, is Gear Fifth one of the hypest transformations in anime history? There's an argument to be made, like when the drums start kicking in and everything, and like you see his hair turns white, and the drums of war have returned once again. Woo, man! It's such a hype moment. And please, like, give the Toei animators a raise because my God, like the every panel of this is like a piece of art in terms of just the flow and the direction of it. And like even rewatching this over again on a loop for our podcast, I'm still getting hyped for it. It's amazing.
And the voice acting. I mean, obviously for people who are watching our live video right now, like you're obviously not watching the clip with us, but if you listen, I mean, the sound's not going. When you listen to the voice acting for Luffy in Gear Fifth, it is some of the most insane performance. Like I one thing that I will say is, I mean, every time a Gear Fifth episode comes on One Piece, you know it's gonna be lit. I mean, that has just been set into stone at this point. Already, episode 1100 is one of the highest rated One Piece episodes on the internet across IMDb, My Anime List, etc., and for good reason. But everyone's like, oh, well, you know, it is not as good as Dragon Ball, like Ultra Instinct. And I say this as a veteran Dragon Ball fan. It's two separate hype waves. It's comparing apple to oranges. But what I would give for the Toei staff to give Goku this kind of gorgeous free-flowing animation. I mean, it's two different forms, but man, I cannot stress enough how emotional seeing the quality of animation that One Piece gets makes me these days. It's insane.
Yeah,
It's
like
insane.
yeah, the most hilarious part of it is that this fight isn't even that important in the manga. Like Oda gives it like maybe like 3 scatter panels across like a couple of chapters, and then they move on. Like, you know, because there are other important things happening. But here the anime team's like, oh yeah, we know what we're doing. And they made it like so much of this fight that we see in this episode is original. And this is why it sparked debates about like Lucci's power level. And because he, you know, at base form, he takes one of Gear 5 Luffy's hits just fine. But you know, there's a lot of debate about that, and, you know, because Luffy has gotten much stronger, and you know, it is supposed to be a squash. Like Luffy is supposed to just like beat off Lucci with no problem, just completely wipe him out. So, but all that said, who cares? This looks incredible. You know, and this would be way hyper. Like this would be way like bigger if it weren't One Piece. I do have to say that. It's because people look at the One Piece mountain, and there's so many fans who are like, I'm not watching 1100 episodes. But if you do, you get moments like this. So it's just another reason to say, yeah.
I'll even say this as like somebody who is watched all of One Piece multiple times through at this point. Like, if you were watching this clip with us, or you have seen clips of One Piece recently online, and you're looking at its animation style, and you're like, man, that's sick. That is so cool. And then you try to go back and you can't get in with the pacing of One Piece at its start. That's okay. Start where you feel comfortable. When you get confused watching an episode, Google it, Wikipedia it, figure it out. Like, there are so many people who are just now getting into One Piece. Even though they're starting at the final arc, there are ways that you can catch up. It's just, for me, as somebody that not just loves anime and, you know, animated series, but just really loves the art of animation, it feels like sacrilege for like me to say like, oh, well, it's okay if you don't want to watch this. Like, I feel like I'm being too strong with my opinion, but it's so good. Truly I like it's almost I'm speechless by it, which isn't great because I'm talking on a podcast.
Yeah, no, you should be watching. That's pretty much it. You should be watching.
Yes, you should be watching. What a great statement. I wish there was a company
One
that,
Piece, you
had
should
that
be
as a
watching.
slogan, which is a great transition for us. Because we do have to pay for the show with an ad break real quick, but when we come back, we are going to be talking about the life and the history of Funimation and what its, essentially its closure means for the future of anime streaming. So stay tuned. Back to Anime Initiative, the anime focus segment of Comic Book Nation. We are back. We are here to talk about the loss, one of the biggest losses, honestly, in the anime industry, I'd say, in modern times, to be quite frank with you, and in how it impacts the state of anime streaming in the future. Because after literally decades, Funimation has been dissolved, which is the most insane statement for me to say. It's been a long time coming, but for those who don't know, 7 days ago, Funimation closed its services. The website now redirects to Crunchyroll. The app is no longer working. Its online library is no longer available. Funimation has been fully merged into Crunchyroll in terms of operations. That doesn't mean all of the shows are available, but it does mean that Funimation as a brand, as a company, is now fully folded in to Crunchyroll, and kind of the Sony Entertainment family. So this has been kind of in the works for, I mean, honestly, years at this point. We've been warned, but a lot of people never really expected Funimation to just like go away. It's crazy, uh, given the sheer impact Funimation has had on just the anime industry, not just in America, but globally, even making pathways in Japan. I mean, the company dates back to 1994, which is, that's a long time. I mean, it's nearly 30 years that Funimation was around bringing anime to America. So, I know I have my thoughts on it, but first, let's just take a moment of silence. I can't even take it seriously. I'm too sad. Evan, how are you feeling?
I mean, it's very sad. Um, it's yeah, Funimation had such a big influence on anime in general. Like anime would not, I don't think it would have been as popular as it is now in North America specifically. And it's so sad to see it go. And just the influence it had on the world at large. Yeah, it's really a shame. It's like tough to get the words out in terms of I don't think we'd be here speaking if, if Funimation hadn't helped pave the way for anime to become this big thing the
Mhm.
world over. So yeah, like pour one out for Funny.
Mhm. What
Yeah,
about you, Nick?
yeah, it definitely sucks because Funimation was such a big deal to me growing up too. In that in home video, that's how I saw a lot of things. Like it's how I saw Dragon Ball, and it's through
Mhm.
Funimation. And I know they weren't the only company dubbing anime at the time, but they were so prevalent. And it's like it's so cool that a anime company from Texas like grew to such a level that basically increased the state of English dubbing and got to a point where we had dubs releasing nearly at the same time and then at the same time as Japanese anime hit, yeah, as they hit in Japan. So
Mhm.
Funimation has led the way in so many just unseen and seen ways in the anime industry that it's sort of gotten, like Evan said, it gotten to the point where we are today, and we would literally not be here without a lot of a lot of their plans. Like a lot of the things they have done have helped cement where anime is. And I, I don't know. It just it feels weird. Like this is
Mhm.
it feels like a major loss. Like I know the company and a lot of the people who work there are still here and still around, and of course they will still be producing stuff within Crunchyroll. But it's just it feels weird, right? Like it
I
just
had, like,
feels like
saying
something's missing.
goodbye to, like, someone in the family, like, even though you know, like, it's almost like if, like, your best friend, like, who's lived with you is, like, moving away, they're like, "Oh, it's the same, I'm still doing the same stuff," and it's like, well, you're not seeing them, like, it's not at face value, like, they're not
Yeah.
the forward
Mhm.
facing, presence that they've had. Um, I mean, to just to look back at the the insanity that like, the fact that Funimation succeeded, like, is a miracle in and of itself. I mean, it was basically brought together after, uh, Jin Fukunaga came forward. His uncle actually worked for Toei Company and Toei Animation and was seeing how well Dragon Ball did in Japan and was like, "Hey, Jin, you're in America. Why don't you get together enough money to license Dragon Ball and show it in the United States? Like, that would be sick." And Jim was like, "Yeah, why not?" So he was just, like, working a regular day job, met with his friend who owned a feed mill in Texas for, like, cattle, and convinced this man to sell his feed mill farm to fund Funimation's creation and license Dragon Ball. Then it took, like, years to convince somebody in America to show Dragon Ball on television, which ultimately Cartoon Network ended up bringing Dragon Ball to Toonami, and it immediately became an instant hit, which then allowed
Mhm.
Funimation to get more licenses and do more things. So the fact that we can thank a cattle feed mill for funding Funimation and how anime really got its first big break in America is insane, not to say that Funimation was the first company that was bringing anime into America. There were many companies doing that before, whether it was legal or not. They were VHSs were getting into America. But Funimation was one of the first that took it up on a big scale and tried to approach it as, any other kind of television or film licensing or production company. Um, and I mean, they went on for a long time. They had a lot of online deals. People can make fun or gripe about the Funimation streaming capabilities or apps as much as they want, but Funimation really was just kind of this stalwart figure in bringing anime to America and really kind of trying to popularize it. So I know we're kind of like having this like weird eulogy moment for the company, but like it still exists, just not at
Mhm.
Funimation. It's just now under Crunchyroll, it's under Sony Entertainment. There are a lot of the people who were at Funimation and kind of those, you know, figures, moved over to Crunchyroll to kind of do their own good work. But we're at this point, we just kinda have to see. We just kinda have to see how it goes. It's only been 7 days.
I,
It's been a week exactly. But there are already some issues, I'll say,
Mhm.
in terms of, you know, Crunchyroll and Funimation coming together. The main thing is, there's still a lot of anime that was on Funimation's now its streaming service that's missing from Crunchyroll. Like, what is it? Like, 100 and like 90 titles or something.
Yeah, it's yeah.
It's a lot.
It's yeah, it's a lot. And like they like it's very it was very good of Crunchyroll to include as much as they did. They did incorporate a lot of the stuff. I gotta admit, it was pretty neat when I opened Crunchyroll app one day and they're like, "Oh, do you want to incorporate your Funimation queue and
That was
library?" And
pretty
I'm like,
sick.
"Yeah, yeah."
Mhm.
So it was cool seeing like all of my queue in one place. I do have to admit that is a plus of all of this. Like there are some positives here, but
Yeah.
at the same time, there are so many shows that did not make the licensing like chaos of whatever happened, and it's unfortunate, especially if you were someone who was in the middle of watching like tons of Black Butler, and now you're like, well, there goes that. I mean, they have the English sub ones, but it's like, well, sometimes like I know I talk about dubs all the time here, but you have I have a preference, and I do like watching a dub more so than a sub release, because I can't watch subbed anime while I'm working. So
I know it is incredibly hard. We have tried.
yeah.
Yeah, it's I mean, there's a full list, and Comic Book has covered this before, talking about what's available. One of the things that kills me is like so when we say there's 190 titles missing, it's not that they're completely missing. Sometimes Crunchyroll will have the English dub of something, but it won't have the original sub, or it'll be vice versa. And this also includes also including live action adaptations of anime titles. Like for me, one of the things that really frustrated me is that between the two, Black Butler didn't make its way over because Black Butler has. Oh, I mean, one, if you've listened to Anime Initiative for any amount of time, you know I love Black Butler. But the new anime's coming out, so I was actively in the middle of watching it when this transition happened. Now, of course, you could still find Black Butler and a lot of these shows on other streaming services. They're on Hulu, some are on Netflix, some are on Amazon Prime. You can find these other places, even Freevee, Tubi, Pluto, all those things. You can find a good few of them elsewhere. Um, but like one thing that gets me is like some of the Monogatari series that like you just can't find that were
Yeah.
were on Funimation. And I will say Crunchyroll's library is massive. It's huge. Their servers have to be so thick. Just the thickest servers possible. Um, but it's definitely disheartening to see that for whatever reason, these specific subs and dubs or, full licensing issues weren't able to get figured out. The anime industry is really complex when it comes to licensing. And we will not get into that in this podcast because we will put you to sleep talking about the legalese and the bureaucracy of it all. But it's just a little frustrating, I will say, but I will also admit, there's a convenience to just being able to be like, just go to Crunchyroll to watch all this stuff, to make that really be the go-to destination for streaming. And one of the other complaints that I know people had was the fact that, on your Funimation account, if you had a lot of digital titles, because when you would buy Funimation Home Video, you would get digital codes
Yeah.
to add it to your
Mhm.
online library. Well, obviously, those did not transfer over to your Crunchyroll account. Crunchyroll doesn't have that infrastructure set for digital titles. There was a bunch of blowback against that, I mean, months ago. So, the executives at Crunchyroll have said that they're working on kind of a I don't even know, like, payback method in order, like, you might get a discount on your Crunchyroll subscription or XYZ, to kind of recompense you for any of your lost digital titles. For me, I mean, I lost a lot. I had so many digital Funimation titles. Now, I will say I didn't use them all the time. Like, I mean, I just knew that I had them, like, as a just in case thing, which again highlights the issue between digital and physical media. Um,
I,
that and
I
I
would have
think,
to say Comic Book Nation is a big endorser of physical media, such
yeah.
as Berserk's Box of War that I have,
Oh, that is
which is
nice.
hard to get one. But yeah, no, it's just kind of one of the things that's it's just tantamount to the struggles between physical and digital releases in general when it comes to
Right.
it, not only anime but like movies and TV shows as well, because I am a physical release dude. I always will be. I still love buying steel books for various like releases. I think that like buying physical Blu-rays and things like that, I'm always a fan of that. So it still like breaks my heart to this day to see like Best Buy is completely doing away with it, and like the DVDs and Blu-ray sections of Targets and Walmarts are just, completely devoid now. So there's always just a give and take with the advent of new technologies and everything, and I hope that we can continue to find a way in the future to kind of blend those two worlds together,
You know,
and make
yeah.
it for the fans, and everything.
Yeah, speaking to that, Evan, speaking of all the changing technologies, in terms of the streaming market itself, you hear this news of Funimation being folded into Crunchyroll and Crunchyroll becoming that bigger of a platform. But at the same time, thankfully, it is not like Megan said earlier, like it is not the only streaming platform out there. In fact, many of the other platforms that offer streaming anime and that offer new weekly releases that are just airing in Japan, they are increasing in their licensing and production and originals as well. Like you have High Dive, which has locked down some of the biggest exclusives. Like it got Oshi no Ko last year, which was like one of the hugest things.
Crunchyroll's mad it doesn't have Oshi no Ko.
Yeah,
they were sitting there like, dang it.
Well, that's you have to imagine that Crunchyroll had gotten Urusei Yatsura for that specific reason, to be like, if you want to watch, High Dive might have the exclusive to the reboot, but if you want to watch 192 episodes of the original series, currently available on Crunchyroll.com.
Yeah, and then you have Netflix increasing their reach, and you have Disney Plus with Hulu increasing their reach and increasing their in terms of production. So at least there is still competition. So, and competition is good for fans. It's good for us because that means, we could talk about the nature of the bubble eventually, but right now we're at a point where there are plenty of options to get new anime releases all the time and to check out stuff. Like you can randomly turn on Pluto TV and watch episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh! Just because, there are options, which is great. But it still is one of those things where as we move away from the physical home media market into the streaming sphere, it is a question of like, where does everything go, right? Like where do we go from here?
Like one thing that I will always find incredibly interesting that really solidifies this conversation of specifically anime in the digital versus physical media is in Japan, it was kind of the Bible of be all end all. And anime was kind of you got its popularity on two things: Blu-ray, DVD sales, and merchandise. That was it. And in the last 10 years, Blu-ray and DVD sales have gone down drastically, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the show is not being popular. I mean, we've seen this with Solo Leveling, we've seen this with Chainsaw Man. Those shows instead were being looked at not in their Blu-ray and DVD sales, but in terms of their streaming viability, which was incredibly high in Japan. So to be able to see that market and industry shift is really interesting. But for me, man, physical media still is just, I wish I had a bigger house. I need more room for my stuff. If it's that big of a show for you, like I'll say this, like I have all the seasons of My Hero Academia, physical print, locked in a safe. You are not taking those away from me. I have Dragon Ball, all of it, GT included, in physical media. For those series that like, if I could not access them, like Kami-sama Kiss, I got that. Or on High School Host Club, I have that. Like I make those like pick and choose things. Like Evan has Berserk. It just seems like, especially given the fact that anime has had such a rise on streaming media, that's the focus. And Crunchyroll is slowly yet surely expanding its home physical releases. Funimation really had a lock on that. That was kind of a bread and butter thing for Funimation.
Yes.
Streaming was an afterthought. that's kind of all shifted now. So now Crunchyroll's priority is streaming, but it is delving into home physical media releases. So the question is, how much of a priority does that become? We're seeing that industrial shift in Japan with, prioritizing streaming successes and numbers and revenue as opposed to Blu-rays and DVDs. And one thing that I think is really interesting is at the beginning of this year, the team at Polygon, they commissioned a big research project with 5,000 random attendees and participants, and they found that of Gen Z, 43% of Gen Z that answered in that, you know, result said that they watch anime on a weekly, if not a daily basis. For millennials, it was about 23%, and then it went down from there. So it's no surprise that Gen Z, which is such a connect. I mean, I'm right in between that like weird Gen Z millennialness. Um, it's no surprise that the people who are growing up with technology and growing up with streaming as their primary way of consuming media, like they're going to anime because anime is so intensely investing in streaming opportunities. And
Mhm.
now big streamers like Disney Plus, Hulu, Amazon, I mean, all of these big names are getting into it. So it's hardly surprising. Um, and it just makes me think that, streaming really is kind of the way that anime has made its investment, uh, which I think is there's good things and bad things about that, which is a bigger
Yes.
conversation
Mhm.
that we can't have in like the next, 10 minutes. But um, it's been really weird to see kind of how that shift went from Funimation of, home videos, bringing those VHSs to fans. It has now moved into just, like, logging in to Crunchyroll and watching that same content you once had to, like, walk into a dark alley at, like, Hollywood Video to get this VHS of Dragon Ball, and maybe it was Dragon Ball, maybe it wasn't, you didn't know. Sometimes there were still Japanese commercials on those VHS tapes because you didn't know. Um and now you can just load it up on Crunchyroll. It's
These
wild. It is a wild delineation to see how it has changed.
these kids these days don't know the struggle of
Oh
being
my god.
introduced to anime via watching Vampire Hunter D with your friend at 2 in the morning on HBO.
Do people these days don't know what it was like trying to watch I mean, this is outing myself here. Trying to watch, uh, the Naruto movie where it's like he goes into the, like, alternate world or whatever, meets his dad.
Oh man.
Trying to watch that on YouTube in 24 different parts, 360p quality, not being able to find it in English. So I watch it in Spanish because I've taken Spanish for 7 years in, like, elementary school and up, and desperately trying to figure out what these words mean because I had no other way to watch it, and it wasn't gonna be coming to America for at least 3 more years. So it is, as much as we wanna, dissect and rightly so the conversation of centralizing entertainment and streaming and all that stuff, you know, Crunchyroll has made it incredibly easy to access this content, which once I would have killed to have had easier access for. So it's always good to remember, like, looking back at those days to see how far you've come, you know, Funimation, Crunchyroll, they did it, you know, and now they're
Yeah.
together, so we're gonna see how it works. Again, it's been
Mm.
7 days, so, we need a little bit more time to get some data points, honestly. But I'm hopeful. I'm definitely hopeful. The Crunchyroll team, you know, they listen to fans. They're fans themselves. So I'm excited to see, what this next era of anime brings because that's truly what it is. It's a passing of the torch. We had Funimation, and now we have Crunchyroll. Let's see what Crunchyroll does, and we'll see what comes next. So, with that said, we'll see how this goes. But that's all the time we have today for Anime Initiative. If you have questions about anime, streaming, manga, anything like that, hit us up online, leave a comment. on wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find us basically anywhere. You can watch us live on Twitch. You can also find us just to listen to us on any podcast service, Spotify, Apple Podcast, you name it. We're probably there. Leave us a comment there. We always want to talk to you guys. Or you can just find one of us hosts online. You can find me on social media at Megan Peters CB. Nick, where can they find you?
You can find me at Volabizology on all the medias, and as well as Pop Culture Social Call together with Anna Rumor.
And what about you, Evan?
You can find me on socials at EV Comedy, and please feel free to hit me up on stories of buying $50 Trigun VHS that had 3 episodes at a time in order to follow Vash the Stampede.
Honestly,
these kids don't know.
I relate to you so much in this moment. It hurts. It hurts. My brother would save up money for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, just getting like a chunk of like a story that you had no idea. Like, I had one Dragon Ball tape that I didn't realize was actually the end of the series until years later. My first Dragon Ball tape ever was Funimation's. It was the Goku versus Oob fight. It was all that. I did not know it was the end of the show until like years later, because you just see it on Toonami every week, and then you see your videos, and I'm like, oh, so I watched the ending first.
Yeah, the way that I didn't watch Sailor Moon in its proper order until I was like in college is insane.
Yeah.
Because I just watched it. I watched whatever I could get. Some of them were even movies, and I didn't even realize it. I was like, where did this fit in? The good old days. But yes, this is Anime Initiative. If you want other nice, good, geeky conversations, Comic Book Nation has you. We obviously have our main series, Comic Book Nation, that heads up all geeky conversations, but we also have the poll list where we talk about comics. We have oh, excuse me. I just completely lost every word in my body. We have Phase Zero, where we talk about all things Marvel. And we also have Quick Save, where we talk about all things video games. So yeah, please hit us up on social. Talk to us. Let us know what you think about anime. I'm going to be watching G Gundam as soon as I get off this podcast. I will be able to talk to you about that. And we'll be back next week with even more great anime news. So until then, we'll see y'all later.